I was lying in bed, barely able to move, when I heard my son's voice through the baby monitor. "She's too sick to notice we're stealing." His wife laughed. I stayed silent. The next morning, they came to check on me. But when they opened the bedroom door, they found the police waiting because I recorded everything. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The fever held me in a vice. Each breath was a rasping effort, a negotiation with the weight on my chest. The ceiling swam in the dark, a blank canvas for my helplessness. The only light was a pale sliver under the bedroom door, from the hallway they always left on. A concession, I'd thought, so I wouldn't be in total darkness. A kindness. The baby monitor on my nightstand hissed with static. David bought it years ago, when his breathing grew shallow at night. I needed to hear if he struggled. After he passed, I couldn't bring myself to unplug it. The soft electrical whisper was a ghost of his presence. Tonight, the static crackled. Then, a voice, muffled from the living room downstairs. Marcus. "Not in the display cabinet. She must have moved it." A lighter voice answered. "Chloe. Well, find it. It's the good one. Sterling silver with that cloisonne edge. It'll bring a lot more than that jade frog." My mind, thick with illness, moved slowly. The silver picture frame, our wedding photo, David's hand on my shoulder, my smile too wide. It sat on the mantel. Where was it? I tried to picture its place. The memory was gauzy, obscured by the fog of the last week. "She's just lying up there," Marcus said, his tone dismissive, a sound I had never heard him use about me. "Out of it. The meds knock her cold. She won't know." Chloe's laugh filtered through the tinny speaker. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "I told you. She's too sick to notice we're stealing." The words did not sink in. They dropped. A lead weight into the still, hot water of my fever. It plunged through the layers of fatigue and pain and found the solid floor of my mind. "She's too sick to notice we're stealing." A cold clarity washed over me, sharper than any fever chill. The weight on my chest multiplied. This was not pneumonia. "Keep your voice down," Marcus muttered, but there was no real caution in it. "Why? You heard the doctor. Viral pneumonia on top of bacterial. She's deaf to the world, and even if she hears, what's she gonna do? Call the police?" Chloe's laugh again. A cruel, giddy thing. "She can barely call for a glass of water." I lay perfectly still. My hands, which had been restlessly picking at the quilt, went limp. I stared at the wedge of light under the door. My son, my only child, in my living room, evaluating my possessions for resale. "We have to be systematic," Marcus said, his voice adopting a managerial tone I recognized from his phone calls about work. "Small things first, things she might genuinely misremember. The spoons were easy, the figurine, the frame. We'll box them and store them in my old room. Once she's better, or in the hospital if she takes a turn, we do a full pass." "The jewelry box is in her top dresser drawer," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the monitor captured perfectly. "I checked yesterday when I brought her soup." I had thanked her for the soup. It was from a can. I had thanked her for her care. "Not yet," Marcus said. "Too obvious. Let's stick to the common areas for now." They continued, their conversation shifting to the practicality of it. Storage units, online auctions, a needed vacation. My belongings were being converted into a timeline for their gratification. Each item they named was a pin on a map of my life, and they were plucking them out, leaving empty, meaningless space. A tear escaped my right eye. It tracked a hot path over my temple and into my hairline. I did not move to wipe it. Another followed. This was not weeping. This was a quiet leak of a fundamental substance, the trust that had composed my world. The pain was cellular, deeper than the ache in my lungs. It was a dissolution. I heard their footsteps on the stairs. I closed my eyes, slowing my ragged breath to the rhythm of drugged sleep. The bedroom door cracked open. The hallway light stretched across my closed eyelids. "See?" Marcus whispered just outside the door. "Out cold." They stood there for a moment, watching me. I felt their gaze like a physical pressure. I was a specimen under glass, a spent resource. I kept my breathing even, a shallow in and out. The door pulled shut, leaving the sliver of light. Their footsteps receded down the hall to his old room. I heard the soft click of that door closing. Then silence. The house was full of a new kind of quiet. It was not peaceful. It was observant, accusatory. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was stable now. The fever still burned, but it was a secondary fact, a condition of the battlefield, not the battle itself. My gaze traveled slowly, deliberately around my room. The familiar shapes of my dresser, the armchair by the window, David's old reading lamp. It was all the same. Yet it was all different. The air had changed. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It had become the site of a crime in progress, and I was the primary witness, presumed incompetent. I thought of the silver frame. I had last seen it 2 days ago before the worst of the fever hit. I had dusted the mantel. I had straightened the photo, my thumb brushing over David's smiling face. It had been there. With a force of will that drew a coughing fit from my ruined lungs, I pushed myself up on one elbow. I looked toward my bedroom door, which led to the upstairs hallway. From my angle, I could see a sliver of the open doorway to the living room downstairs. I could not see the mantel, but I knew. The space where the frame sat would be empty, a clean circle in the dust, a missing piece. I lay back down. The coughing subsided, leaving a raw throat and a clearer head. The hurt was a vast, cold lake inside me, but on its surface, a single solid thought had formed, hard as a stone. It was a beginning. They thought I was too sick to notice. That was their critical error. My sickness was a curtain, and from behind it I would now watch everything. I would listen. I would remember. The baby monitor hissed its steady white noise. It was no longer a relic of my late husband's care. It had become my first intelligence tool. They had given it to me themselves. The tears had stopped. My face was dry. The heat of my body was now a focused energy. I turned my head on the pillow and looked directly at the small, dark speaker of the monitor. I made a promise to myself, silent and precise. I will notice everything. The morning light was a gray intrusion. I had not slept. The night hours were spent in a state of suspended animation, listening to the house settle, each creak a potential footstep. The fever still simmered, but the new awareness acted as a stimulant, sharpening my senses to a painful edge. I knew their routine. They would arrive between 9 and 10 under the guise of checking my vitals and bringing groceries. Performance art with a key role for me, the feeble mother. I prepared for my part. I mussed my hair further against the pillow. I left the water glass on the nightstand just out of my immediate reach. When I heard the key turn in the front door lock, they had taken my house key last week for convenience. I let my eyes fall half shut. My breathing become a labored, audible process. "Mom, you awake?" Marcus's voice called up, falsely bright. I made a weak assenting sound that wouldn't carry. I heard them moving downstairs, the rustle of grocery bags. The performance had a prelude. Then, footsteps on the stairs. They entered the room together. Chloe carried a tray with toast and tea. Marcus wore his concerned frown, the one that pinched the space between his eyebrows. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, placing a cool hand on my forehead. "Still warm." "Tired," I whispered, my voice rasping authentically. "So tired." "You need to keep your strength up," Chloe chirped, setting the tray on my lap. The toast was dry, the tea was lukewarm. We brought some fresh orange juice, too, lots of vitamin C. I nodded slowly, as if the information took time to process. "Thank you, that's kind." "We stopped by the pharmacy," Marcus said, shaking out a new thermometer from its case. The doctor called in a stronger expectorant. I'll pick it up this afternoon. He slipped the thermometer under my tongue. Just rest, Mom. Don't worry about a thing. We're handling everything. I know exactly what you're handling, I thought. I stared blankly at the floral pattern on the quilt, waiting for the thermometer to beep. Still 101.8, he announced, showing me the digital readout as if I couldn't see it. You need to sleep more. Maybe we should draw the blinds? No, I said, a little too quickly. The window was my only unmediated connection to the outside. The light, it's not bothering me. He shrugged. Okay, just try to eat something. We'll be downstairs sorting some things out. Call if you need us. He patted my hand. His touch felt like a brand. They left, pulling the door almost shut. I listened to their descent. The moment the last step creaked, their voices dropped from the caring tones to normal conversation. Did you see the way she looked at the toast? She's barely coherent, Chloe said, not whispering now. The meds are strong. It's for the best. Keeps her calm, Marcus replied. Then silence. They were in the living room. I pictured them standing there, looking around, making mental notes. The toast turned to chalk in my mouth. I took a sip of the tepid tea to force it down. Nourishment was a tactical requirement now. I waited a full 20 minutes until I heard the soft click of the television coming on. A daytime talk show, low volume. They were settled. Moving was an act of pure will. Every joint ached. My lungs protested with a sharp pinch as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My walking frame was positioned nearby, where Marcus had left it, just in case. I grasped its cold metal grips, the vibration of my weakness traveling up my arms. I stood, the room tilting for a moment before righting itself. I was a ghost in my own house. The frame's rubber tips made soft, shuffling sounds on the hardwood as I moved from the bedroom to the upstairs hall. The journey to the top of the stairs was a marathon. I paused, gripping the banister with one hand, the frame with the other. The descent was a careful, sideways nightmare, each step a calculated risk. But the fear of falling was less than the need to know. I reached the bottom. The living room archway was to my left. The television murmured. From my position, I could see the back of the sofa. The top of Chloe's head was visible. She was scrolling on her phone. Marcus was out of sight, likely in the dining room. I moved away from the archway, down the short hall to the powder room. It was a plausible destination. I closed the door softly, waited a full minute, then flushed the toilet and ran the faucet. The mundane sounds of an invalid. When I emerged, the path to the living room was clear of direct sightlines. I shuffled forward into the space. The morning sun cut through the front window, illuminating motes of dust in the air. The room looked normal at a glance, tidy. But I was not glancing. I was auditing. My eyes went first to the mantel. The wedding photo was indeed gone. In its place was a faint, clean rectangle against the lightly dusty wood, a void. I moved my gaze slowly, item by item, shelf by shelf. The small jade figurine of a crane that my mother brought back from San Francisco in 1972. It had sat on the corner of the bookshelf for 40 years, gone. A thin layer of dust outlined its absence. I turned my head with deliberate slowness toward the display cabinet that held my mother's antique sterling silver. The formal set for 12 was there, too cumbersome. But the small, delicate bonbon spoons, each with a different floral handle, that had been in a velvet-lined box on the top shelf. The box was there. I shuffled closer. It was open, empty. A pressure built behind my sternum, different from the pneumonia. It was a cold, dense weight of confirmation. I heard a floorboard creak in the dining room. I immediately let my head droop, pretending to be overcome by a coughing fit. I turned away from the cabinet, leaning heavily on the frame, my shoulders shaking with the real, but now useful, coughs. "Mom?" Marcus's voice came from the dining room doorway. "What are you doing down here?" I looked up, affecting confusion. The bathroom," I managed between coughs. "I got turned around. The hall, He was there in an instant, his hand on my arm. His grip was firm, guiding. "You shouldn't be out of bed. Come on, let's get you back upstairs." His voice was a mixture of irritation and that false concern. He was steering me away from the living room, back toward the stairs. "I was just looking for my photo," I mumbled, leaning into the persona of confusion. "The silver one, of David and me." He didn't miss a beat. "It's probably in your room somewhere, Mom. You've been moving things around. The fever makes you forget." He said it with such calm assurance, a rehearsed line. "Don't worry about it now. You need to rest." He helped me up the stairs, a slow and painful procession. He resettled me in bed, pulling the quilt up to my chin as if I were a child. "Stay put. We'll be leaving in a little while. We have some errands to run. Edith said she'd stop by later with soup." He left, closing the door firmly. I heard the distinct sound of the lock on his old bedroom door snicking shut down the hall. A vault for their loot. I lay there, the cold weight in my chest solidifying into a plan. It was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. My son and his wife were systematically robbing my home. The small, precious anchors of my history were being boxed and stored for sale. The humiliation of being manipulated, of being thought a helpless, forgetful old woman, was a fuel. It burned cleaner than the fever. The performance was over. The assessment was complete. They were thieves, and I was no longer a victim. I was a witness. A witness needed evidence. My mind, clear now in a way it hadn't been in days, began to methodically catalog not just what was missing, but how to prove who had taken it. The baby monitor was a start, but it was not enough. I needed their voices, their plans, in undeniable detail. I needed to see the transaction myself. The law, I knew, cared for proof. Sentiment meant nothing. A clean rectangle of dust in an otherwise dusty house meant nothing. But a voice on a recording discussing the pawn value of a stolen spoon? That meant something. I looked at my smartphone charging on the nightstand. A modern tool. They assumed I only used it for phone calls and the occasional photo of my roses. They were wrong about that, too. I picked up the phone. Its weight was negligible, but its potential was immense. They saw a device for trivialities. I saw a recording studio, a research terminal, a weapon. My first task was to understand the rules of the engagement. Evidence was only powerful if it was admissible. I opened the internet browser. My fingers, dry and slightly swollen, were clumsy on the touchscreen. I typed slowly, "Is it legal to record a conversation without consent in my state?" The search results loaded. I clicked on a link from a .gov website. The text was dense with legal terminology, but the key point was clear. My state was a one-party consent state. This meant that if one person in a conversation consented to the recording, it was legal. I was that one person. If I recorded a conversation I was a part of, it was legal. If I recorded a conversation in my own home, where I had a reasonable expectation of privacy, it was likely legal. The baby monitor, however, was a gray area. It was my device in my home, but I was not physically present in the room where the conversations occurred. I decided to focus on the smartphone. It was cleaner. Next, I needed to master the tool. I opened the voice memo application pre-installed on the phone. I had never used it before. I pressed the large red button. A waveform appeared on the screen, jumping with the ambient noise of my room. I spoke softly, testing. Today is Tuesday. The time is 11:47 a.m. I stopped the recording and played it back. My voice was thin, wheezy, but perfectly intelligible. Good. The practical challenge was placement. The phone needed to be close enough to capture their voices clearly, but hidden from immediate view. It needed to run for potentially hours without them noticing. And I needed to be able to start and stop it remotely, or at least without leaving my bed. I looked around my room. From my bed, I had a direct line of sight into the upstairs hallway through the partially open door. If they stood in the hall outside my room or in the open doorway, a phone on my nightstand might capture them. but their most damning conversations happened downstairs. Then I remembered the living room side table. It was a small, cluttered table next to the armchair where David used to read. It held a lamp, a few magazines, and a small pottery dish for loose change. The back of the table was against the wall, hidden from the main room by the chair's high back. If I could place the phone there, behind the lamp base, it would be invisible to anyone standing in the room. The charger cable could even be plugged into the outlet behind the table, making it look like it was simply charging. But getting the phone downstairs was a problem. I couldn't risk shuffling down again today. They would be suspicious. I needed an opportunity. Edith's promised soup visit was my best chance. I could ask her to bring the phone down to charge, claiming the upstairs outlet was faulty. It was a thin excuse, but Edith was not a suspicious person. In the meantime, I could optimize my immediate setup. I propped the phone against the base of my reading lamp on the nightstand, screen side down with the microphone port facing the door. I started a test recording. Then I got out of bed and stood just outside my doorway in the hall, speaking at a normal volume. Testing. Testing. Can this pick up a conversation in the hallway? I shuffled back to bed, stopped the recording, and listened. My voice from the hall was faint but clear. It would suffice for anything said at my doorway. Next, the baby monitor. I unplugged the parent unit from my nightstand and examined it. There were small buttons on the side for volume and sensitivity. I found the sensitivity setting and turned it to the maximum level. I plugged it back in. The static hiss was noticeably louder. I could now hear the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. It was a risk. They might notice the increased noise, but they had shown no attention to detail where my comfort was concerned. They viewed my environment as static. Preparation complete. A lull settled in. The house was quiet. They had left for their errands, the lock on Marcus's old door firmly engaged. In the stillness, my mind did not rest. It replayed not the cruel words from the monitor, but older memories, triggered by the familiar geography of my planning. This house was the map of my life. The hallway where I had just tested the microphone was where Marcus, at age 5, had raced his tricycle on rainy days, the wheels leaving faint scuff marks I could never bring myself to buff out. The dining room table, now a staging ground for their theft, was where I had helped him with his reading week after week when the letters refused to make sense for him. He would slump in the chair, frustration tightening his small shoulders. "I can't do it, Mom. It's too hard." "Yes, you can," I would say, my finger under the word on the page. "Sound it out. C-A-T. Cat," he'd say, and the smile that would break across his face was a pure, unadulterated victory. I would hug him, smelling the little boy's smell of grass and sunshine on his skin. "See? You did it. You just have to break it down into pieces, one piece at a time." The memory was so vivid, the ghost of that smell seemed to linger. The lesson was the same now, applied to a different, terrible problem. Break it down into pieces, one piece at a time. The first piece was evidence. The back door opened. I heard Edith's familiar, gentle call. "Grace, it's Edith. I've got that soup for you." "I'm upstairs, dear," I called back, my voice resuming its frail register. "Come on up." Her footsteps were light on the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, a kind-faced woman with soft white curls, holding a large thermos. "Chicken and rice, my mother's recipe. It'll fix you right up." "You're an angel, Edith, thank you." The gratitude was real. She bustled about, pouring soup into a bowl from my nightstand. "Those kids of yours been looking after you?" she asked, her tone casually polite. "Oh, yes," I said, very attentive. I paused, watching her. "Edith, could you do me a small favor? My phone battery is dreadful, and this outlet by my bed seems loose. Would you mind taking it down to the living room to charge for a bit? The table by David's old chair has a good outlet." "Of course, honey." She took the phone and its charging cable without a second thought. "I'll just plug it in and leave it be." "Perfect, thank you." I watched her leave the room, my heart beating a steady, purposeful rhythm. The first piece was in motion. The phone was now in position. The baby monitor was listening. I was listening. All that was left was to wait for the players to return and speak their lines. The stage was set. I had broken the problem down, and now I was ready to collect the pieces, one damning word at a time. The house remained quiet after Edith left. The soup sat cooling on my nightstand. My focus was not on nourishment, but on the device downstairs. It was a passive sentinel, its red recording light hidden. I had asked Edith to plug it in and leave it. She had. Now, I had to wait for my son and his wife to return and fill the silence with their own condemnation. They came back in the late afternoon. I heard the front door open, the shuffle of bags, their voices pitched in normal conversation. I immediately picked up the baby monitor. The increased sensitivity brought their words into my room with unsettling clarity. "Just have to list them individually for better bids," Chloe was saying. "Bulk lots get lower offers." I know," Marcus replied, a note of tension in his voice. "But it's time-consuming. We need to move faster." "We are moving. The silver spoons are already listed. 3 people are watching the auction." I lay back, the monitor pressed to my ear. This was the first confirmation, captured not just by the monitor's speaker, but now, I hoped, by the phone's more precise microphone downstairs. They were not just stealing. They were already selling. The next morning, after their usual performative check-in, I devised a reason to retrieve the phone. When Marcus brought up my midday pills, I gestured weakly toward the hallway. Edith was so kind to bring the soup. I feel bad I haven't called to thank her. My phone... Is it still downstairs charging? "I think so," he said, distracted. "Do you want me to get it?" "If you wouldn't mind, my head is a bit clearer today. I'd like to send her a text." He returned a moment later, handing me the phone. Its screen was dark, but the charge icon showed it was at 98%. He had not touched it. He had no reason to. It was just his mother's old phone. "Don't tire yourself out," he said, and left. The moment his footsteps receded down the stairs, I opened the voice memo app. A list of recordings appeared. There were 3 files, each several hours long, time-stamped from yesterday afternoon and this morning. My breath caught. I connected my headphones, plugged them in, and pressed play on the first file. For a few minutes, there was only ambient noise. The distant hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the house, the muffled sound of the television. Then, their voices. "This is taking too long," Chloe's voice said, clear and close. She must have been sitting in David's armchair right next to the table. "We need to hit the jewelry box soon. That's where the real value is." "We will," Marcus answered. His voice was fainter, moving around the room. "But the jewelry is the most obvious. If she asks about a missing spoon, we can say we used it for something and it got lost. If she asks about her mother's pearl necklace, she'll know." "She won't ask. She's doped up and delirious half the time. Look at her. She can't even keep track of a photo frame." There was a long pause. I heard the rustle of paper, perhaps a catalog. "Some of this stuff is just junk," Marcus said. "Her taste is so old lady. Who buys ceramic figurines of birds?" "Collectors," Chloe replied, her voice sharp. "That's what you don't get. It's not about taste, it's about market value. That Hummel-looking one of the bluebirds? I bet we could get 200 for it. The whole collection in the china cabinet might be worth over 1,000. My ceramic birds. My mother had started the collection, a gift for each birthday. I had continued it. Each one held a memory of a year, a place, a feeling. They saw a line item in an inventory. I listened, my face impassive. I picked up a small legal pad and a pen from my nightstand. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote the date and time of the recording. Then I began transcribing, word for word, the key exchanges. I noted the subject of each conversation: spoons, jewelry, ceramic collection. I noted their tones: Chloe's impatient greed, Marcus's logistical anxiety. The second recording, from later that evening, was worse. They were drinking wine. I could hear the clink of glasses. "To our tropical vacation," Chloe said, a smile in her voice. "To Mom's nest egg," Marcus replied, and they both laughed. Then, a discussion of pawn shops versus online auctions. The specific mention of the jade piece and the silver frame already being sold. Chloe estimated the total they'd gotten so far. The number was a vulgar quantification of my history. The third recording was from this morning. They thought I was asleep upstairs. They were planning the next phase. "Today, we take the small porcelain vase from the entry table," Chloe directed, "and the set of linen napkins with the monogram. They're vintage. Then tomorrow we start on the china cabinet. The birds first, then the teacups." "What about the watch?" Marcus asked. A pause. "Not yet. That's the big one. We save that for last. It's too personal. We need to be ready to move quickly after that." The watch. David's watch. They had their eyes on it. A coldness settled in my stomach, solid and steady. I stopped the recordings. I had heard enough. The evidence was no longer a suspicion. It was an archive. Their voices, their plans, their contempt, their greed, all captured in digital clarity. The legal pad in front of me was filled with neat chronological notes, a ledger of betrayal. I saved the audio files to a cloud storage account I rarely used. I emailed a copy to myself. I was creating multiple redundancies. A single phone could be broken or taken. The evidence needed to exist beyond this room. The physical act of documenting, of organizing the proof, had a strange effect. The initial paralyzing hurt was still there, a deep ache, but it was now compartmentalized. It existed in one part of me. In another, larger part, a cold, functional determination had taken root. This was no longer about my feelings. It was about facts. It was about proof. It was about consequences. I looked at the baby monitor. It was no longer just a listening device. It was a timer. They had a schedule. Tomorrow, we start on the china cabinet. The theft was escalating. My window for action was narrowing. I had the evidence of theft. I had the evidence of intent to sell, but I needed something more definitive to force the hand of the authorities. A discussion of past actions was strong. A discussion of a future, irreplaceable target, the watch, might be stronger. I needed them to state their plans for it clearly, on the record, and I needed to be ready to act the moment they crossed that final line. The pieces were mounting. My legal pad was a testament to their crimes. All I had to do was wait for them to deliver the final damning piece of dialogue themselves. The trap was no longer just set. It was already filling with their own words. The morning arrived with a thin gray light. I followed the new routine. When Marcus brought up my breakfast, cold cereal this time, I made my request. "My phone battery is terrible again. Would you mind letting it charge downstairs today? I might want to listen to an audiobook later." He shrugged, taking the phone from my nightstand. "Sure, Mom. Whatever you need." His indifference was a tool I now relied upon. He saw no strategy, only a sick old woman's trivial distractions. He took the phone downstairs. The sentinel was back in position. I ate the cereal slowly, my ears attuned to the baby monitor. They were in the kitchen, their voices a low murmur. Then I heard the distinct sound of the front door opening and closing. One of them had gone out. The monitor fell silent. An hour passed. The house was still. Then the front door opened again. 2 sets of footsteps. Chloe's voice was animated. It was perfect. He didn't even ask where it came from, just evaluated the weight and the mechanism. "How much?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "500. Cash. I told you it was worth it." A cold sweat broke out on my skin, unrelated to the fever. They had done it. They had taken something and sold it already. But what? The birds? The spoons? "Good," Marcus said. "That covers the storage unit payment for 6 months. We need to clear out my old room. It's getting full. Let's start bringing boxes down." My body went rigid. This was it. The escalation. They were moving from selective theft to bulk removal. I heard their footsteps on the stairs, passing my door, going to the locked room down the hall. The sound of the key in the lock was a sharp, metallic stab. Then the sound of dragging of cardboard sliding across hardwood. They made several trips. I lay perfectly still, breathing shallowly, listening to the procession of my life being boxed and carried away. After the third trip, they paused in the hallway just outside my door. Their voices were clear through the monitor. "We should do the watch today," Chloe said, her voice dropping, "while we're on a roll. It's just sitting in her top drawer. She never wears it anymore." "I don't know," Marcus said. A flicker of something, hesitation. "That was Dad's. It feels different." "It's a watch, Marcus. A vintage Rolex. It's worth more than everything else in this house combined. That's the prize. That's what funds the whole new start. You want to back out now?" A long silence. I could picture his face, the conflict between greed and a ghost of conscience. The conscience lost. "Okay," he said, the word flat. "Okay, but we do it quick. You go in. She's probably asleep. Just get it and close the drawer." "Finally," Chloe whispered. I heard her footsteps approach my door. My eyes were closed. I regulated my breathing to the slow, deep rhythm of drug-induced sleep. The door eased open. I sensed her presence in the room, a shift in the air pressure. I could smell her perfume, a cloying floral scent. She moved quietly to my dresser. I heard the soft pull of the top drawer opening, a slight rummage, a pause. Then, the gentle click of the drawer closing. The footsteps retreated. The door side shut. They had taken it. David's anniversary watch. The one he saved for 2 years to buy, the one he wore every day until the day he died, the one I kept ticking with a careful wind every Sunday. It wasn't greed anymore. It was erasure. They were deleting David from this house, from my life, converting the symbol of his love and our time into a down payment on a vacation. A fury, white and pure, ignited in my chest. It burned away the last remnants of feverish weakness, the last traces of paralyzing grief. This was the line. They had crossed it. The plan was no longer about gathering evidence for some future action. The time for action was now. I waited until I heard the front door close. They had taken a load to the storage unit. I had a window. I sat up. My movements were steady, purposeful. I picked up the house phone from my nightstand. My hand did not shake. I dialed the non-emergency number for the local police department. It rang 3 times. "Police Department, Sergeant Miller speaking." My voice, when it came out, was clear. It was my librarian's voice, the one I used for story hour, modulated and calm. "Good morning, Sergeant. My name is Grace Henderson. I live at 214 Maple Lane. I am reporting an ongoing theft and fraud. The perpetrators are in my home currently, and I have collected audio evidence of their plans and admissions." There was a brief pause on the line. "Ma'am, you say they are in the home with you now." "They have just left the premises temporarily with a load of my stolen property. They will return within the hour. I am bedridden with illness, so I cannot leave. I have compiled digital recordings and a written log. The theft is systematic and includes items of significant monetary and sentimental value, most recently my late husband's valuable wristwatch." "I see." His tone shifted, becoming more focused. "Are you in immediate physical danger?" "I do not believe so. Their goal is theft, not violence. They believe I am unaware and incapacitated." "Okay, Mrs. Henderson, we can send an officer to take a statement. Can you play some of this audio evidence for me now over the phone? Just a short clip so I understand the nature of the situation." "Yes, Sergeant. One moment." I set the receiver down, picked up my smartphone, and navigated to the audio files. I selected a clip from yesterday where Chloe explicitly discussed pawning the jade figurine. I turned the volume to maximum, held the phone speaker close to the telephone receiver, and played it. The tinny but unmistakable voices filled the space. "The jade piece, already listed. 3 people are watching the auction." I stopped the playback and picked up the receiver. "Did you hear that clearly?" "I did," Sergeant Miller said, his voice now carrying a note of professional gravity. "That is compelling. We will dispatch an officer to your location. The officer will assess the evidence and advise you on the next steps. Do not confront them. Can you secure yourself in your room until the officer arrives?" "I can," I said. "The officer should come to the front door. I will instruct my son that it is a wellness check from a neighbor, so as not to alert them. Please have the officer ask for me by name." "Understood, Mrs. Henderson. We'll have someone there within 30 minutes. You sit tight." I hung up the phone. The calm that settled over me was profound. It was the calm of a decision made, of a path chosen. The passive witness was gone. I had just become an active participant. I had summoned the law into my home. The chessboard was no longer hidden. I had just called in the queen. I looked at David's photograph on the nightstand, the one in the simple wood frame they had deemed worthless. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his smiling face, "but I have to finish this." Then I picked up my legal pad, reviewed my notes, and prepared for the arrival of the police. The final straw had not broken me. It had given me a weapon. The police cruiser pulled up to the curb 25 minutes later. I watched its slow approach from my bedroom window, a detached observer of my own life. A single officer emerged, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense posture. She adjusted her duty belt and walked to the front door. This was the moment. The outside world was entering the sealed theater of my betrayal. I heard the doorbell ring. Downstairs, Marcus, who had returned from the storage unit, muttered something. I heard his footsteps. I picked up the house phone, pressed the intercom button for the front door speaker. My voice, amplified, filled the foyer. "Marcus, dear, that will be Officer Clark. She's doing wellness checks for the Neighborhood Association for Seniors. Edith must have mentioned I was ill. Please let her in and show her up." I released the button. The silence downstairs was palpable. I had preempted his suspicion with a plausible, boring explanation. A wellness check, a civic duty, something he would want to dispatch quickly. I heard the front door open. The officer's voice, polite and professional. "Good morning. I'm Officer Lee. I'm following up on a community outreach note regarding a resident with recent illness, a Mrs. Grace Henderson." "That's my mother," Marcus said, his tone carefully neutral. "She's upstairs. She's been quite sick. I can assure you she's being cared for." "I'm sure she is. I just need to see her for a moment, confirm her well-being for our records. It won't take long." "Of course. Right this way." Their footsteps ascended the stairs. My room was prepared. The legal pad and a printout of the audio file timestamps were on my lap. My smartphone was in my hand. I had put my reading glasses on. I looked every bit the informed, if frail, homeowner. Marcus opened the door. Officer Lee stood behind him, her eyes sweeping the room, taking in the medical detritus, the bedridden woman, then landing on me. Her gaze was assessing, sharp. "Mom, this is Officer Lee, for the community outreach." Marcus lingered in the doorway, a sentinel. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice weak but clear. "Would you mind giving us a moment? It's just a formality. Perhaps you could put the kettle on for tea for our guest?" He hesitated, conflict on his face. He did not want to leave me alone with a police officer, no matter how benign the pretext. But to refuse would seem odd, suspicious even. "Sure, I'll be right downstairs." He retreated, leaving the door ajar. Officer Lee stepped fully into the room and closed the door with a soft, definitive click. The atmosphere changed immediately. The professional mask softened into one of focused concern. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm Officer Lee. Sergeant Miller briefed me. Are you safe right now?" "I am," I said. "They are thieves, not assailants. Thank you for coming." She pulled the armchair closer to the bed and sat, removing a small notebook. "Tell me concisely what's been happening." I presented the facts in order as I had organized them in my ledger: the initial overheard conversation, The missing items corroborated by the dust outlines, the recorded discussions of theft, valuation, and sales. I handed her the legal pad. She scanned my neat script, her eyebrows rising slightly at the specificity. "And you have audio of these conversations?" "I do, recorded on this phone, from a location downstairs. Our state is a one-party consent state. I was a party to these conversations as they occurred in my home." I had researched the phrasing. "May I hear a sample?" I had prepared a clip. It was the conversation about the watch from this morning, captured by the baby monitor's speaker, which I had recorded on my phone as a backup. I played it. The voices were slightly muffled but unmistakable. "We should do the watch today. It's just sitting in her top drawer. It's a vintage Rolex. It's worth more than everything else in this house combined." Officer Lee listened, her face impassive. When it finished, she gave a single slow nod. "That's clear evidence of intent and of targeting a specific high-value item. The other recordings detail ongoing criminal activity. You said the watch was taken this morning?" "Yes, by my daughter-in-law, Chloe. She entered my room while I pretended to be asleep. It was in my top dresser drawer. It is now gone." "And the other stolen property?" "Boxed in my son's old bedroom, which he keeps locked, and some has been taken to a storage unit. They discuss the unit's location on a recording from yesterday. I have the address noted." She looked at me, a new respect in her eyes. "This is exceptionally well documented, Mrs. Henderson. It's more than enough for search warrants and arrests. The primary charges would be burglary, theft, and fraud against a vulnerable adult. Those are felonies." The clinical terms, felonies, vulnerable adult, were both jarring and satisfying. They framed the emotional wreckage in a structure that could be acted upon. "What happens now?" I asked. "We need to catch them in possession, ideally with some of the stolen goods still here. You said they check on you daily?" "Every morning between 9 and 10. They come upstairs, perform a brief inspection, then usually go to the living room or the locked room to continue their work." Officer Lee considered. "We will obtain the warrants this afternoon. Tomorrow morning, before their arrival, my team and I will enter your home. We will be concealed. When they arrive and begin their routine, we will apprehend them. We will then secure the locked room and the storage unit. Do you consent to this?" "I do." "You understand you will have to be present. It may be confrontational." "I understand. I will be ready." She stood. "Then we are set. I will have a plainclothes detective come later today to officially take your statement and enter the evidence into the chain of custody. For now, act normally. Do not change your behavior. We will handle the rest." She extended her hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm, warm. "You've done the hard part, Mrs. Henderson. We'll see it through." She left, descending the stairs. I heard the murmur of voices, Marcus's forced cheerfulness. The front door closed. A moment later, Marcus appeared in my doorway. "Everything okay, Mom? What did she want?" I offered a faint, weary smile. "Just what I said. A formality. She said to keep taking my medicine and get plenty of rest." I let my eyes drift closed. "I think I'll sleep now." "Good idea," he said, and pulled the door shut. Alone, I opened my eyes. The plan was no longer mine alone. It was now an official operation. The law had validated my evidence and my actions. The calm I felt was the calm of alignment. My personal justice and the state's justice were now pursuing the same end. All that remained was the performance tomorrow. I had my role to play, the sick, oblivious mother. It would be my final act in that part. After tomorrow, that woman would be gone forever. I woke before dawn. The fever was a distant memory, a historical fact my body had cataloged and moved past. The weakness remained, but it was a manageable variable now, a component of the performance to come. I moved through my morning routine with a detached precision. I washed my face, brushed my hair, and put on a fresh nightgown, a simple faded cotton one that enhanced the image of vulnerability. I did not get back into bed immediately. First, I rearranged the pillows to support me in a semi-reclined position, one that suggested prolonged infirmity, but also allowed me a clear view of the door. I placed the baby monitor on the nightstand, its green power light a tiny, steady eye. Next to it, I laid the manila folder containing the printed timestamps and my handwritten ledger. My smartphone was in my hand, a backup recorder already activated, though its primary job today was to be a prop. The house was profoundly still. It was the stillness of a theater before the curtain rises, when the sets are finished and the actors are in position, waiting for the audience to arrive. I was the lead actor and the director and the playwright all in one. At 7:30 a.m., a dark, unmarked sedan pulled up to the curb. I watched from my window as Officer Lee and two plainclothes detectives, a man and a woman, exited the vehicle. They did not approach the front door. Instead, they walked around the side of the house, to the gate leading to the backyard. I had left it unlocked. Moments later, I heard the softest tap at my bedroom door, which I had left ajar. "Mrs. Henderson, it's Officer Lee." "Come in." The three of them entered, moving with a quiet efficiency that was almost soundless. Officer Lee gave me a brief professional nod. "This is Detective Harris and Detective Yoon. We have the warrants. Are you ready?" "I am." "We'll be in the walk-in closet. Leave the door open a crack. We will hear everything. Do not give any signal. Just proceed as you have been. When they are both in the room, we will come out. Do you understand?" "Yes. We'll be right here." She gestured, and the three officers disappeared into my large walk-in closet. The door closed until only a hairline crack remained. Then, silence. I was alone again, yet the atmosphere of the room had transformed. The air felt charged, dense with latent action. I looked at the closet door. Behind it were three armed representatives of the state, holding warrants for the arrest of my son. The power dynamic, which had tilted so far in his favor, had not just leveled, it had inverted. He just didn't know it yet. I settled back against the pillows, arranging my hands on top of the quilt. I slowed my breathing. I allowed my face to relax into the mask of weary sickness I had worn for a week. It was not difficult to summon the physical sensations. The aftermath of the pneumonia provided a genuine foundation. But behind the lethargic eyes, my mind was a clear, cold pane of glass. I waited. The clock on the nightstand ticked softly. I thought of nothing. I did not revisit the hurt or the anger. I did not think of David. I existed purely in the present moment, an instrument tuned to a single purpose, the flawless execution of the next 15 minutes. At 9:07 a.m., I heard the familiar sound of a key in the front door lock. The crunch of gravel under tires had been too soft for me to hear, but the lock was distinct. My heart rate did not change. My breathing remained slow and shallow. Their voices floated up, the same saccharine tones. "Mom, we're here," Chloe called too brightly. I made a faint, acknowledging sound. I heard them deposit bags in the kitchen, then their footsteps on the stairs. A pair. They were coming together. Good. They paused outside my door. I could picture them there. Marcus probably straightening his shirt. Chloe fixing her smile. They thought they were entering the room of a victim. They were entering a courtroom. The door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway, Chloe hovering just behind his shoulder. Their expressions were set in identical molds of concerned solicitude. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Marcus asked, stepping into the room. He came to the side of the bed, his shadow falling over me. He reached for my forehead as he always did. His hand was cool and dry. "You still feel a little warm." "Tired," I whispered, letting my voice trail off. I blinked slowly up at him. "Did you sleep well?" "We did, thanks," Chloe said, coming to stand at the foot of the bed. She was looking not at me, but at the room, her eyes doing a quick inventory. They landed on the manila folder. "What's all this, Grace? You've been doing paperwork?" Her tone was lightly teasing, a hint of condescension. I let my hand flutter weakly toward the folder. Old bills. Edith helped me sort them. I was trying to be useful. I injected a note of confused frustration into my voice. Marcus's face softened with patronizing reassurance. "Don't worry about bills, Mom. We're taking care of everything. That's what we're here for." His gaze swept over me, seeing exactly what he expected to see. A weak, aging woman, slightly addled, entirely dependent. "You just focus on getting better." "We brought you some fresh muffins," Chloe said, "and we'll be in and out today. We have to run some errands later, but we'll check on you before we go." "Thank you," I murmured, my eyes drifting toward the window as if I were losing focus. "You're both so good to me." It was the cue they were waiting for. The performance of care was complete. Now they could move on to the real business of the day. Marcus patted my hand. "We'll let you rest. We'll just be downstairs if you need anything." They turned to leave. This was the moment. They were both in the room, their backs to the closet. The trap was sprung. All that was left was the springing. My hand, which had been lying limp on the quilt, moved. It did not tremble. It closed firmly around the edge of the manila folder. I did not look at the closet. I looked at the space where they had been standing, and I took a quiet, final breath of the old, helpless air. I said nothing. I simply waited for the door to open. The closet door opened. It did not swing wide with drama. It simply slid inward, and the three officers stepped out into the room. They moved with a solid, deliberate quiet that filled the space more completely than any shout could have. Marcus and Chloe, who had taken a single step toward the hallway, froze. The change in the air was palpable. They turned, their movement slow with disbelief. Officer Lee was in front, her badge held up. "Marcus Henderson, Chloe Henderson, police, stay where you are." Marcus's face underwent a rapid transformation. The patronizing concern melted into blank shock, then twisted into indignant confusion. "What is this? What's going on? Mom, are you okay?" He took a half step toward the bed, but Detective Harris moved to intercept him. "Step back, sir. Do not approach her." "Approach her. She's my mother. I'm taking care of her. Who are you people?" Officer Lee ignored him, addressing Chloe, whose hand had flown to her mouth. "Chloe Henderson, you are under arrest for burglary, theft, and fraud against a vulnerable adult. You have the right to remain silent." As she recited the Miranda rights, Marcus spluttered, "This is insane. What are you talking about? Burglary? This is my mother's house." I said nothing. I watched. I held the manila folder in my lap. My face was a mask of calm observation. Detective Yoon produced a folded document. "We have a search warrant for the premises, specifically the locked bedroom down the hall and any vehicles or storage units associated with you. We also have an arrest warrant for you, Mr. Henderson, for the same charges." The color drained from Marcus's face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. His eyes darted from the detective to me, back to Officer Lee. "This is a mistake, a terrible mistake. Mom, tell them. Tell them we've been caring for you." His voice climbed, edged with a panic he could no longer conceal. I met his gaze. I did not speak. In my silence, he saw the truth. The confusion in his eyes shattered, replaced by a dawning, horrible comprehension. He saw the folder in my hands. He saw the absence of surprise on my face. He saw the woman he believed was too sick to notice, watching him with the lucidity of a judge. "You," he breathed, the word barely audible. Chloe found her voice, a shriek. "She's confused. She's sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. You can't listen to her." Officer Lee finished reciting the rights. "Turn around, please. Place your hands behind your back." Chloe burst into frantic tears, a chaotic, ugly sound. No, you don't understand. We were helping her. We were managing her affairs. She's not competent." Detective Harris guided Marcus to turn around. The metallic click of the first handcuff encircling his wrist was a sharp, definitive sound in the room. Marcus flinched as if struck. He looked over his shoulder at me, his eyes wide with a betrayal so profound it mirrored my own from a week before. "Mom, how could you do this?" It was the wrong question. It was the question of a child caught stealing cookies, not a man caught dismantling his mother's life. I finally spoke, my voice steady, devoid of the weakness I had feigned for days. "I recorded you, Marcus. I have hours of audio. You and Chloe discussing what to steal, what it was worth, where to sell it. You took David's watch yesterday." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The last vestige of his facade crumbled. The arrogant son, the manager of my decline, was gone. In his place stood a caught thief, exposed and small. Chloe was sobbing, her body limp as Detective Yoon guided her hands behind her back. "It was his idea. He said she wouldn't know. He said it was just sitting here." "Shut up, Chloe," Marcus snarled, a flash of the old contempt, now directed at his accomplice. "Search incident to arrest," Officer Lee said, her voice cutting through the chaos. She removed Marcus's wallet, his keys. From his jacket pocket, she pulled a small felt jewelry pouch. She opened it and tipped the contents into her gloved palm. David's Rolex slid out, its steel bracelet catching the morning light. She held it up, showing it to me. "Is this the watch, Mrs. Henderson?" "Yes," I said. "That is my late husband's watch. It was taken from my top dresser drawer yesterday morning without my consent." Marcus closed his eyes. The officers finished securing them. With hands cuffed behind their backs, Marcus and Chloe were led from the bedroom. Marcus paused at the threshold, turning his head for one last look at me. His expression was a turbulent mix of fury, shame, and a bewildered hurt. I held his gaze, my own face impassive. No tears, no recriminations, just the silent, undeniable fact of what he had done and what I had done in return. They shuffled down the hall, the detectives on either side. I heard their footsteps on the stairs, the opening of the front door, the murmur of neighbors who had undoubtedly gathered outside at the sight of police cars. Then, the door closed. The house was not yet quiet. I could hear the officers beginning their systematic search of the locked room down the hall. But the central drama was over. The reckoning had occurred. The thieves had been taken. I sat in my bed, the folder of evidence still in my hands, and listened to the sound of justice being executed, room by room, box by box. The sound of the front door closing had a finality that echoed through the empty halls. The police were gone, having taken Marcus and Chloe to the station for booking. I heard their cars pull away from the curb. Then a different silence descended. It was not the anxious quiet of the past week, thick with hidden threats. This silence was profound, clean, and vast. It was the silence of a stage after the actors have exited, leaving only the set. I sat in my bed for a long time. I did not move. I listened to the absence. No whispered conspiracies from the baby monitor, no creaking footsteps from the locked room, no falsely cheerful voices calling up the stairs. The house was simply a house again, my house, and it felt alien. The officers had completed their search of Marcus's old room. Before leaving, Officer Lee had come to my doorway, a clipboard in her hand. "We've cataloged the contents of the room, Mrs. Henderson. Boxes of silverware, ceramics, linens, photo albums, electronics. We've taken photographs and will be seizing it all as evidence. We also served the warrant on the storage unit. We'll provide you with a detailed inventory." She had paused. "Is there someone you can call to be with you?" "My neighbor," I had said. "Edith." "Good. We'll be in touch with updates from the district attorney's office. You did the right thing." Now, in the wake of her departure, the reality of that right thing settled around me. It was a heavy mantle. There was relief, yes, a deep bone-level relief that the siege was over, but it was immediately accompanied by a hollow grief. I had not just stopped a crime. I had ended a relationship. My only child was in a police cell. The knowledge was a cold stone in my stomach. I pushed back the quilt. My body felt lighter, the weakness more a matter of disuse than illness. I stood without the walking frame and went to my dresser. I opened the top drawer. The space where the watch had been was a neat rectangle of drawer liner. I closed it. I walked downstairs, each step deliberate. The living room was as I had last seen it, but now it was empty of their presence. The sunlight streamed in, highlighting the dust on the mantel where the photo frame had been. I did not tidy it. I went into the kitchen. I filled the kettle and put it on the stove. The simple, familiar ritual of making tea was a tether to normality. As the kettle whistled, there was a soft knock at the back door. Edith's face appeared in the window, etched with concern. I unlocked the door and let her in. "Grace, honey, I saw the police cars. I waited until they left. What in the world happened? Are you all right?" Her eyes scanned my face, looking for distress. "I'm all right, Edith, thank you." I gestured to the kitchen table. "Would you like some tea?" She sat, watching me as I moved between the counter and the table. I placed 2 cups of tea between us. I sat down. "It was Marcus," I said, my voice even, "and Chloe. They were stealing from me. The police have arrested them." Edith's hand flew to her chest. Her eyes widened, then filled with a deep, immediate sorrow. "Oh, Grace, no, your own boy?" "Yes, but why? How could they?" "They thought I was too sick to notice." I took a sip of tea. The warmth was comforting. I noticed. We sat in silence for a moment. Edith reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was soft and cool. "What can I do?" "This is enough," I said, nodding at the tea, at her presence. "Just this." She did not press for details. She understood the boundaries of grief and shame, even when the shame was not mine to bear. We drank our tea. She told me about her rose bushes, about a new recipe she wanted to try. The ordinary cadence of her voice was a balm. It anchored me to a world where people brought soup and talked about roses, a world that existed outside the drama of betrayal and handcuffs. After she left, promising to return tomorrow, I began the practical work. I found the phone book and called a locksmith. I explained I needed all the exterior locks changed immediately. He said he could come within the hour. Next, I called the lawyer who had handled David's will, a man named Benjamin Carter. His secretary put me through. "Grace," he said, his voice warm with recognition. "It's been a while. How are you?" "I need your help, Ben. It's about Marcus." I gave him a brief, unemotional summary: the theft, the recordings, the arrest. He listened without interruption. "I see," he said when I finished. His tone had become professional, focused. "You've done everything correctly so far. The criminal case is in the DA's hands. My role would be to represent your interests in any related civil matters, potentially suing for the return or value of the stolen items, ensuring your assets are protected moving forward. I can also interface with the criminal prosecutors on your behalf." "I would like that," I said. "Please send me the engagement paperwork, and I will need to update my will." "Of course. I'll have my assistant messenger the documents over this afternoon. In the meantime, do not speak to Marcus or Chloe if they try to contact you. Direct any communication to me." "Understood." I hung up. The logistical tasks were a scaffolding, something to build around the emptiness. The locksmith arrived and worked for an hour. The sound of his drill a loud, decisive noise in the quiet house. He handed me 3 new sets of shiny keys. I paid him and locked the door behind him. I walked through the house, testing each new lock. Front door, back door, side garage door. Each click was a reclaiming. I ended up in the kitchen again. The evening light was long and golden. I heated the last of Edith's soup and ate it at the table. Alone. The silence was still there, but it was changing. It was no longer the silence of absence. It was becoming the silence of solitude, a chosen quiet. The baby monitor, unplugged, sat on the counter. I looked at it for a long moment. then picked it up and placed it in the drawer with the spare batteries and old instruction manuals. I would deal with it later. The house was mine again. The legal machinery was in motion. The fury and the heartbreak were still present, but they were now contained, like artifacts placed on a shelf. They were part of the history of the house, but they no longer controlled the occupant. I washed my bowl and spoon, dried them, and put them away. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs to bed, in a house that was, for the first time in days, truly safe. A week passed. The pneumonia had receded, leaving behind a lingering cough and a constitutional fatigue that was more about recovery than illness. My strength returned in increments, measured in small victories, walking to the mailbox without pausing, carrying a full laundry basket, standing at the stove to scramble an egg. The house, with its new locks, was no longer a gilded cage. It was a domain again, and I, its sole, capable steward. The police had returned the bulk of the recovered property from the storage unit. It arrived in the same cardboard boxes Marcus had used, sealed with evidence tape. I had the delivery men place them in the living room. For 2 days, I ignored them. On the third morning, I made a pot of strong coffee, took a box cutter, and began. I opened each box. I did not unpack them fully. I lifted out items, examined them, and made a decision. The set of antique spoons went into a donation pile for the Historical Society's fundraising auction. The jade figurine, which had held my mother's memory, I kept. Many of the ceramic birds, whose individual stories had been reduced to inventory in Chloe's voice, I placed in the donation pile. I kept 3. The first one my mother gave me, the one David bought on our trip to Savannah, and the last one I'd bought for myself the year he passed. The rest could fund a scholarship or buy books for a library. They would have a purpose again. The silver picture frame was found in a pawn shop in another county, recovered by the police. I cleaned it carefully and placed it back on the mantel. David's watch was on my wrist now, its weight a familiar comfort, its steady tick a private reassurance. I wound it every morning. My lawyer, Ben Carter, called with updates. The district attorney's office was moving forward with felony charges. The evidence was overwhelming. A plea deal was likely, avoiding a trial. Marcus and Chloe had separate attorneys now. There were no calls from Marcus. Ben said his attorney had requested a mediated meeting, a chance for Marcus to speak to me before sentencing, with lawyers present. I agreed. It was not for closure, it was for documentation. The meeting was held in a small, neutral conference room at Ben's office. I wore a simple linen dress. Marcus was brought in by his lawyer. He wore a suit that looked too large on him now. He was thinner, his eyes hollow. He sat across from me, a wide table between us. Ben and Marcus's lawyer were present, silent witnesses. Marcus looked at me. His expression was complex. Shame, resentment, a desperate hope. "Mom," he began, his voice raspy. I held up a hand not to silence him, but to establish the terms. "This is a formal meeting, Marcus. You may speak." He flinched at my tone. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. It was a mistake, a huge, stupid mistake. Chloe, she pressured me. We were in debt. I was scared. I wasn't thinking. I listened. I noted the grammar. It was a mistake. Passive voice. Chloe pressured me. Deflection. I wasn't thinking. Minimization. There was no, "I chose to steal from you." No, "I betrayed your trust." It was the language of a child caught, not a man taking responsibility. "I understand you are sorry for the consequences," I said, my voice level. "The legal process will determine the appropriate outcome. My role is finished." "Your role? Mom, I'm your son." The plea in his voice was sharp, aggrieved. "You are," I agreed. "And you are also the person who stole from me, who conspired to defraud me, who believed I was too incapacitated to matter. The law is addressing one of those realities. I am addressing the other. I will not be visiting you. I will not be taking your calls. Any necessary communication will go through Mr. Carter. This is the last time we will speak. Do." The finality of the statement hung in the air. His face crumpled, then hardened. The shame was chased away by a flash of the old anger. "So that's it? After everything, you're just gonna throw me away?" I did not answer. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing the boy I raised in the lines of the man who had hurt me. The love was still there, but it was a fossil now, a shape preserved in stone, devoid of its living warmth. I stood up. Ben stood with me. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said. I turned and walked out of the room. I did not look back. There was nothing more to see. The following afternoon, a beautiful, clear day, I finished my tasks. I called a local charity to schedule a pickup for the donation boxes. I finalized the new will with Ben, leaving the bulk of my estate to a literacy foundation and a small trust for any future grandchildren, administered by an independent trustee. The house would go to the Historical Society upon my passing. My affairs were in order. In the late afternoon, I made a cup of tea, Earl Grey with a slice of lemon. I carried it out to the front porch. The baby monitor, its cord neatly coiled, was in the metal trash can at the curb, awaiting weekly pickup. I sat in the worn wicker chair David had loved. The cushion sighed under my weight. I looked at my garden. The roses were beginning their first bloom. The lawn needed cutting. The fence could use a fresh coat of paint. These were my concerns now, manageable, finite. I took a sip of tea. The sun was warm on my face. A breeze carried the scent of cut grass from a neighbor's yard. In the quiet, I felt no triumphant vindication. I felt no crushing sorrow. I felt a steady, quiet peace. The storm had passed. The house was mine. The silence was my own. I had noticed. I had acted. I had survived. I took another sip, leaned back in the chair, and watched a robin hop across the lawn. It was enough. It was my own key, turning in my own lock. The story was over, and the next quieter chapter had begun.